Your son didn't die in an accident. 6 words, written on a napkin, handed to a man who thought he knew everything about his own company. Daniel Cross froze. The fork in his hand stopped moving. His breath caught in his throat. He was sitting in a small diner in Oakland, California, dressed like a regular customer, eating a $15 burger. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody was supposed to. But the woman who just gave him that note. She knew something. Something that would tear his entire world apart. Subscribe, like, and comment as we dive into this life-changing story. Her name was Keisha Monroe. A waitress working double shifts just to keep the lights on. She had no reason to trust him. No reason to believe he'd do anything. But she took the risk anyway. And that risk didn't just save one life. It exposed a truth so dark, so buried, that an entire corporation would fall because of it. This isn't a story about food. This isn't a story about money. This is a story about what happens when someone with nothing finds the courage to speak up. And what happens when someone with everything is forced to listen. Before we go any further, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories that shake you to your core. Stories about real people doing extraordinary things when no one's watching. Now take a deep breath. Because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about power, family, and the people you walk past every single day without seeing. Let's go. Daniel Cross wasn't born rich. People always forget that part. They see the headlines calling him tech millionaire under 40. They see the photos of him shaking hands with politicians and CEOs. They assume he came from money. They're wrong. Daniel grew up in a cramped 2-bedroom house in South Memphis, Tennessee. His dad was a mechanic who worked 16-hour days just to pay rent. His mom cleaned houses for families who wouldn't let her use the front door. They didn't have much, but they had each other. And they had dreams for their son. Daniel was smart, really smart. By 14, he was building apps on an old laptop his cousin gave him. By 19, he dropped out of community college to launch a software company from his mom's garage. By 25, he sold that company for $12 million. Now, at 38, he owned Cross Logistics, a tech company that handled supply chains for hospitals, schools, and government buildings across the country. His company was worth $400 million. He lived in a condo in San Francisco with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge. He drove a silver Audi. He sat on 3 nonprofit boards. But money doesn't erase pain. It just buries it deeper. 3 months ago, Daniel's 18-year-old son, Marcus, died. The police said it was an accident. A fall at one of Daniel's warehouses in Oakland. Marcus had been working there part-time during his gap year before college. They said he slipped near a loading dock, hit his head, died instantly. Daniel didn't believe it, not fully, but he had no proof. Just a gut feeling that something wasn't right. Then the letter came. It was anonymous, typed, mailed to his office with no return address. It said, "Your son didn't fall. Someone pushed him, and they're still working at your warehouse. If you want the truth, come see for yourself." Alone, Daniel could have called the police, could have sent his lawyers, could have hired a private investigator. But he didn't, because sometimes, when you want real answers, you have to go looking for them yourself. So he did exactly what the letter said. He came alone. No security, no assistant, no fancy clothes, just a plain black hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. He walked into Ray's Diner, the small restaurant across the street from his Oakland warehouse. It was the kind of place his employees ate at during their lunch breaks. Cheap food, plastic booths, fluorescent lights. He sat down at a corner table, ordered a burger and fries, and waited. That's when she walked over. Keisha Monroe was tired, the kind of tired that lived in your bones. At 32 years old, she'd been working at Ray's Diner for 6 years. Before that, she was a nurse. A good one. She loved her job, loved helping people, but when her younger brother got sick with kidney disease, she had to take care of him full-time. The hospital bills piled up. She lost her nursing license because she couldn't afford to renew it. And just like that, her career was over. So she became a waitress. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't what she dreamed of. But it paid the rent. Barely. Ray's diner was across the street from a huge warehouse owned by Cross Logistics. Every day, workers from that warehouse came in for lunch. They ordered burgers, drank coffee, complained about their shifts, and Keisha listened. She heard things people say when they think no one important is around. She heard about the unsafe equipment, the broken forklifts, the managers who cut corners to save money, the workers who got hurt and were told to keep quiet or lose their jobs. And then, 3 months ago, she heard about the kid who died. Marcus Cross, the boss's son. The workers whispered about it for weeks. Some said it was an accident. Others said it wasn't. One guy, a forklift operator named Trey, said he saw what happened. Said it wasn't a fall. Said someone pushed Marcus during an argument. But Trey was scared. He had a family to feed. He couldn't afford to lose his job. So he kept quiet. Keisha kept quiet too, at first. But then she saw the father. Daniel Cross walked into her diner that Tuesday afternoon looking like a ghost. He wasn't wearing expensive clothes. He didn't have bodyguards. He looked broken. She recognized him from the news. She'd seen his face on TV after his son died. And now here he was, sitting alone in a plastic booth, staring at a menu like he didn't even see it. Keisha felt something shift inside her. She didn't know why. Maybe it was because she'd lost people too. Maybe it was because she was tired of watching powerful people get away with hurting the powerless. Maybe it was just because she couldn't stay silent anymore. She walked over to his table, pulled out her notepad, and said, "What can I get you?" Daniel looked up. Their eyes met, and for just a second, she saw it. The pain, the doubt, the desperate need for answers. "Burger and fries," he said quietly. "Anything to drink." "Water's fine." She nodded, wrote it down. Then, without planning it, without thinking it through, she did something crazy. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a napkin, and wrote 6 words with a pen that was almost out of ink. "Your son didn't die in an accident." She folded the napkin, slipped it under his water glass, and walked away before he could say anything. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. She didn't know if he'd believe her. Didn't know if he'd even read it. But she'd done it. She'd spoken up. And now there was no going back. Daniel reads the note. Daniel didn't notice the napkin at first. He was staring out the window, watching workers cross the street toward his warehouse. He was thinking about Marcus. About the last conversation they had. About all the things he should have said and didn't. Then his hand brushed against the water glass. He felt something underneath. He lifted the glass, saw the folded napkin, picked it up. He opened it, slowly. And when he read those 6 words, the entire world stopped. "Your son didn't die in an accident." His chest tightened. His vision blurred. He read it again, and again, and again. His first thought was, "This is a cruel joke." His second thought was, "What if it's not?" He looked up, scanned the diner, saw the waitress, the one who'd just served him, standing behind the counter. She wasn't looking at him. But her shoulders were stiff. Her hands were gripping the counter like she was holding on for dear life. Daniel stood up, walked straight to the counter. His voice came out low and shaky. "Who wrote this?" Keisha didn't turn around. "I did." "Why?" "Because it's the truth." "How do you know?" She finally looked at him. Her eyes were steady, strong. "Because I listen. And because people talk when they think no one important is around." Daniel's throat went dry. "What do you know?" Keisha glanced around. The diner was almost empty. Still, she lowered her voice. "Not here. Meet me after my shift. 9 p.m. Behind the diner. I'll tell you everything." "Why should I trust you?" "You shouldn't," she said. "But you're here, aren't you? That means you already know something's wrong." Daniel stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, turned, and walked out of the diner without touching his food. Keisha watched him go, and for the first time in months, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Daniel spent the next 6 hours pacing his hotel room. He didn't call his lawyers. Didn't call the police. Didn't call anyone. Because if what that waitress said was true, if someone really did push his son, then he couldn't trust anyone in his company. Not yet. At 8:45 p.m., he left the hotel. Drove back to the diner. Parked in the back lot. Waited. At exactly 9:03 p.m., The back door opened. Keisha stepped out. She wasn't wearing her uniform anymore. Just jeans and a hoodie. She looked around, saw his car, walked over. She got in the passenger seat without saying a word. Daniel looked at her. Talk. Keisha took a deep breath. And then she told him everything. Your son was murdered, Keisha said. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. And the man who did it still works at your warehouse. Daniel's jaw clenched. Who? His name is Vincent Ramirez. He's a shift supervisor. Been with your company for 8 years. Why would he kill my son? Keisha looked down at her hands. Because Marcus saw something he wasn't supposed to. Daniel felt his chest tighten. What did he see? Stolen shipments. Vincent's been running a side operation for months. Medical supplies, equipment, drugs, stuff your company ships to hospitals. He's been skimming inventory, falsifying records, selling it on the black market. Marcus found out, confronted him, and Vincent pushed him off the loading dock to shut him up. Daniel couldn't breathe. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. How do you know this? Because I hear things, Keisha said. Your workers eat at my diner every day. They talk, they gossip, they complain. And about a week after Marcus died, I heard 2 guys from your warehouse whispering about it. One of them, a guy named Trey, he saw the whole thing. He was working that night. He saw Vincent and Marcus arguing. He saw Vincent shove him. And he saw Vincent tell everyone it was an accident. Why didn't he go to the police? Because Vincent threatened him. Told him if he said anything, he'd make sure Trey lost his job. Told him he had connections. Told him accidents happen to people who talk too much. Daniel's voice came out like gravel. Where's Trey now? Still working at your warehouse. Day shift, loading dock, supervisor. And Vincent, night shift supervisor. Same building. Daniel stared straight ahead. His mind was racing. His heart was pounding. Everything inside him wanted to storm into that warehouse right now and tear Vincent apart with his bare hands. But Keisha put a hand on his arm. Don't. Daniel turned to her, his eyes burning. That man killed my son. I know, Keisha said. But if you go in there now, he'll know someone told you. He'll destroy evidence. He'll disappear. And you'll never prove what he did. Daniel's breathing was heavy. Then what do I do? Keisha met his eyes. You play it smart. You gather proof. You get Trey to talk. And then you bury Vincent so deep he never sees daylight again. Daniel stared at her. Why are you helping me? Keisha's voice cracked just a little. Because I know what it's like to lose someone and have no one believe you. My brother died 2 years ago. Kidney failure. But it wasn't just the disease that killed him. It was the system. The hospitals that turned him away because he didn't have insurance. The doctors who didn't care because he was poor. I watched him die slowly, and I couldn't do anything about it. She wiped her eyes quickly. I couldn't save him, but maybe I can help you get justice for your son. Daniel's throat tightened. For the first time in 3 months, he didn't feel alone. Thank you, he whispered. Keisha nodded. Now let's get to work. Over the next 3 days, Daniel and Keisha worked together in secret. Daniel didn't go back to his office in San Francisco. He stayed in Oakland. He rented a small apartment under a fake name. He dressed like a regular guy. And every night, he met Keisha behind the diner to plan their next move. First, they needed proof. Real, solid proof that Vincent was stealing and that Marcus had found out. Daniel accessed his company's internal servers remotely. He pulled up shipping records for the past 6 months. And there it was. Dozens of shipments marked as delivered that never actually arrived. Medical supplies, insulin, syringes, pain medication, all listed as delivered to hospitals across California. But when Daniel called those hospitals, they said they never received half of those shipments. The records had been altered. Someone with access to the system had changed the numbers to cover their tracks. And that someone was Vincent Ramirez. But that wasn't enough. They needed a witness. Someone who saw what happened the night Marcus died. That meant they needed Trey. Trey Johnson was a 34-year-old father of 3. He'd worked at Cross Logistics for 6 years. He was a good worker. Quiet, reliable, kept his head down. But ever since the night Marcus died, he hadn't been sleeping. He saw it every time he closed his eyes. The argument, The push. The sound of Marcus hitting the concrete. Trey wanted to speak up. He really did, but Vincent had made it clear what would happen if he did. And Trey couldn't afford to lose his job. His wife was pregnant with their 4th kid. His oldest daughter needed braces. He was already living paycheck to paycheck. So he stayed quiet, and the guilt was eating him alive. One Thursday afternoon, Trey walked into Ray's diner for lunch. He sat at his usual booth, ordered his usual burger and fries. Keisha walked over with his food, set it down on the table, and then, quietly, she slid a folded piece of paper under his plate. "Don't open it here," she whispered. "Open it when you're alone." Trey looked up at her, confused. But she was already walking away. He waited until he got back to his car. Then he unfolded the paper. It said, "I know what you saw. I know you're scared, but Marcus's father knows the truth now. And he needs your help. If you're ready to do the right thing, meet me at the diner tonight, 10 p.m. Back door. You won't be alone." Trey's hands shook as he read it. His heart pounded in his chest. He could ignore it, throw the note away, pretend he never saw it. Or he could finally tell the truth. That night, at 9:58 p.m., Trey pulled into the back parking lot of Ray's diner. He sat in his car for 2 full minutes, gripping the steering wheel, trying to decide if he should just drive away. But then he thought about Marcus. A kid who was just trying to do the right thing. A kid who died because he spoke up. Trey couldn't let that be for nothing. He got out of the car, walked to the back door, knocked twice. Keisha opened it. She didn't smile. She just nodded. "Come in." Trey stepped inside. The diner was closed. The lights were dim. And sitting at a booth in the corner was Daniel Cross. Trey froze. "Mr. Cross." Daniel stood up. His face was calm, but his eyes were red. "Sit down, Trey." Trey didn't move. I don't know what you think I know you were there," Daniel said quietly. "I know you saw what happened. And I know Vincent threatened you." Trey's throat went dry. "I'm not here to get you in trouble," Daniel continued. "I'm here to ask you to help me get justice for my son." Trey looked down. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "If I talk, I lose my job. Vincent has friends. He'll make sure I never work again. If you talk," Daniel said, "I'll make sure you and your family are taken care of. New job, better pay, legal protection, whatever you need." Trey looked up. "You mean that?" "I swear on my son's grave." Trey's eyes filled with tears. He sat down, and then, for the first time in 3 months, he told the truth. "It was a Wednesday night," Trey said. "Around 11 p.m., I was loading pallets near the dock. Marcus was doing inventory checks in the back. He was a good kid. Worked hard. Didn't complain." He paused, took a breath. "Then I heard shouting. I looked over and saw Marcus and Vincent arguing near the edge of the loading dock. Marcus was holding a clipboard. He was yelling something about missing shipments. About how the numbers didn't add up. Vincent told him to mind his business. But Marcus wouldn't back down. He said he was going to report it." Trey's voice cracked. Vincent grabbed him, shoved him, hard. Marcus stumbled backward, and then, he fell. 20 feet, straight down onto the concrete. Daniel closed his eyes, his fists clenched. "I ran over," Trey continued. "Vincent was standing at the edge, looking down. He saw me, and he said, 'You didn't see anything. Understand? This was an accident. He slipped. If you say anything different, you're next.'" Trey wiped his eyes. "I should have said something. I should have called the police. But I was scared. I'm still scared." Daniel opened his eyes. His voice was low and cold. "You're not going to be scared anymore. Because Vincent Ramirez is going to pay for what he did." Daniel didn't call the police. Not yet. Because he knew Vincent would lawyer up. He knew Vincent would claim it was an accident. And without hard evidence, it would be Trey's word against Vincent's. So Daniel decided to get Vincent to confess. He worked with Keisha and Trey to set up a meeting. They told Vincent that Trey wanted to talk, that he was feeling guilty and needed to clear his conscience. Vincent agreed to meet him at the warehouse after hours. What Vincent didn't know was that Daniel would be there too, wearing a wire, recording everything. It was a Friday night. The warehouse was empty except for Vincent and Trey. Vincent walked in, hands in his pockets, looking relaxed. "What's this about, Trey?" Trey stood near the loading dock. His hands were shaking. I can't do this anymore, man. I can't keep lying. Vincent's smile faded. Lying about what? About Marcus. About what really happened. Vincent's eyes narrowed. I told you to let it go. I can't, Trey said. That kid didn't deserve to die. He should have minded his own business, Vincent said coldly. So you admit it, a voice said from the shadows. Vincent spun around. Daniel stepped into the light. His face was stone. His eyes were fire. You, Vincent breathed. Me, Daniel said, and I heard every word. Vincent's face went pale. He looked at Trey. You set me up. You killed an innocent kid, Trey said. You deserved it. Vincent turned to run, but two police officers stepped out from behind a stack of crates. They'd been there the whole time, listening. Vincent Ramirez, one of them said, you're under arrest for the murder of Marcus Cross. Vincent didn't fight. He didn't say a word. He just stood there as they cuffed him and read him his rights. Daniel watched. His chest was tight. His eyes were wet, but he didn't cry. Not yet. As they led Vincent away, Daniel turned to Trey. Thank you. Trey nodded. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. You spoke up when it mattered, Daniel said. That's what counts. Vincent Ramirez was charged with second-degree murder. The evidence was overwhelming. The recording, Trey's testimony, the shipping records. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. But for Daniel, the fight wasn't over. Because what happened to Marcus wasn't just about one bad man. It was about a system that allowed people like Vincent to operate unchecked. A system that valued profit over people. A system that needed to change. And with Keisha by his side, Daniel was about to make sure that change happened. In Chapter 2, Daniel Cross got justice for his son. Vincent Ramirez, the man who murdered Marcus, was arrested and sentenced to 25 years in prison. But Daniel's fight wasn't over. Because Marcus didn't die just because of one bad man. He died because of a broken system. And now, with the help of waitress Keisha Monroe, Daniel is about to rebuild that system from the ground up. This is Chapter 3, the final chapter. Let's finish this story. The day after Vincent's sentencing, Daniel stood in front of his entire company. Not on a stage, not in a boardroom, in the warehouse. The same warehouse where his son died. Over 200 employees gathered around him. Some knew what had happened. Others were just finding out. Daniel didn't read from a script. He didn't have a PR team write his words. He just spoke from the heart. 3 months ago, I lost my son, he said. His voice echoed through the warehouse. He died in this building. And for a long time, I believed it was an accident. But it wasn't. He was murdered. By someone I trusted. By someone who worked for me. By someone who was stealing from this company and got away with it because nobody was paying attention. The room was silent. That ends today, Daniel continued. I failed my son. I failed to see what was happening right under my nose. I failed to create a safe place for him to work. And I failed every single one of you. He paused, looked around at the faces staring back at him. But I'm not going to fail you again. Starting today, Cross Logistics is changing. We're implementing new safety protocols. We're creating an anonymous reporting system so that if you see something wrong, you can speak up without fear. We're hiring an independent ethics team to review every department. And we're increasing wages across the board because you deserve to be paid fairly for the work you do. He took a breath. And one more thing. I'm promoting someone who showed more courage than anyone in this company. Someone who risked everything to tell me the truth. He gestured to the side. Keisha stepped forward. She was wearing a simple blouse and slacks. She looked uncomfortable with all the attention. But she stood tall. This is Keisha Monroe, Daniel said. She's a waitress. She works across the street. And she's the reason we got justice for Marcus. Because of her, a murderer is in prison. Because of her, this company has a chance to do better. He turned to her. Keisha, I'm offering you a job. Director of Employee Relations. Your job will be to make sure every worker in this company feels heard, valued, and safe. Will you accept? The room erupted in applause. Keisha's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. Yes. Daniel shook her hand. And for the first time in months, he smiled. Keisha Monroe had never worked in an office before. She'd been a nurse. She'd been a waitress. But she'd never sat at a desk with her own nameplate and a view of the Oakland skyline. It felt strange, unreal, like she was living someone else's life. But she wasn't going to waste it. Her first week on the job, she set up listening sessions with workers from every department. She didn't sit in an office and wait for complaints to come to her. She went to them. She walked the warehouse floors. She ate lunch in the break room. She asked questions. And she listened. She heard about the broken equipment that hadn't been fixed in months. She heard about the managers who played favorites. She heard about the workers who were too scared to take sick days because they thought they'd get fired. And she fixed it, one problem at a time. She fought for better health insurance. She pushed for paid family leave. She made sure every employee had access to mental health resources. And slowly, things started to change. Workers who used to keep their heads down started speaking up. Managers who used to ignore complaints started paying attention. The culture shifted. It wasn't perfect. Change never is. But it was real. Over the next year, Daniel and Keisha became a team. She taught him how to see his company through the eyes of the people who kept it running. He taught her how to navigate corporate politics and fight for change from the inside. They didn't always agree. They argued. They debated. But they respected each other. And they both wanted the same thing, a company that treated people with dignity. One afternoon, they sat in Daniel's office, reviewing employee feedback forms. Keisha looked up from the stack of papers and said, "You know, a year ago, I was serving burgers for minimum wage. Now I'm sitting in a millionaire's office, making decisions that affect hundreds of people. It's wild." Daniel smiled. "A year ago, I thought I knew everything about my own company. Then a waitress handed me a note that proved I knew nothing." Keisha laughed. "Yeah, that was a pretty crazy day." Daniel's smile faded. "You saved me, Keisha. Not just from losing my company. From losing myself. I was drowning in grief and anger. I didn't know how to move forward. But you gave me a purpose. You gave me a reason to fight." Keisha's eyes softened. "You gave me a purpose too. I spent 2 years feeling powerless. Like nothing I did mattered. But you showed me that one person can make a difference. Even if they're just a waitress." Daniel shook his head. "You were never just a waitress." On the 1-year anniversary of Marcus's death, Daniel held a memorial at the warehouse. He planted a tree in front of the building. A young oak tree, strong, resilient, growing. Underneath the tree, he placed a plaque. It read, "In memory of Marcus Cross, a young man who stood up for what was right, and paid the ultimate price. May we honor his courage by creating a world where doing the right thing doesn't cost you everything." Over 300 people attended the memorial. Workers, managers, city officials, and Keisha. She stood next to Daniel as he gave a short speech. He talked about Marcus, about his dreams, about his love for justice, about how he died trying to fix something that was broken. "My son didn't deserve to die," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "But his death wasn't meaningless. Because of him, this company is better. Because of him, we're holding ourselves accountable. And because of him, we're building something that will last." He looked at Keisha. "And because of people like Keisha Monroe, we're making sure that what happened to Marcus never happens to anyone else." The crowd applauded. Keisha didn't say anything. She just placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. And they stood there together, under the tree, honoring a young man who changed everything. The changes at Cross Logistics didn't stay inside the company. Other businesses started paying attention. Articles were written. News segments aired. People wanted to know how a millionaire CEO and a former waitress had transformed a company from the inside out. Daniel and Keisha were invited to speak at conferences. They talked about transparency, about accountability, about the importance of listening to the people on the ground. And they inspired others to do the same. Across the country, workers started speaking up. Managers started listening. Companies started changing. It wasn't a revolution. It was a ripple. But ripples have a way of becoming waves. 2 years after handing Daniel that note, Keisha sat in her office, staring out the window at the Oakland skyline. She thought about her brother. About how he died because the system failed him. About how powerless she felt. She thought about that day in the diner. About the decision to write those 6 words on a napkin. About how scared she was. And she thought about everything that had happened since. She'd helped bring a killer to justice. She'd changed the lives of hundreds of workers. She'd proven that one person, no matter how small, can make a difference. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. Board meeting in 10. Ready, she smiled. Typed back. Always. She grabbed her notebook, stood up, and walked out of her office with her head held high. Because Keisha Monroe was no longer a waitress. She was no longer powerless. She was a leader, a voice, a force, and she was just getting started. That night, Daniel sat alone in his condo, looking at a photo of Marcus. He'd kept it on his desk for 2 years. A photo of his son smiling, wearing his Cross Logistics uniform, looking proud. Daniel used to look at that photo and feel only pain, only regret, but now, he felt something else. Gratitude. Because Marcus's death, as tragic as it was, had opened his eyes. It had forced him to see the truth. And it had led him to people like Keisha, who reminded him what real courage looked like. I miss you, son, Daniel whispered. Every single day, but I promise you, I'm doing everything I can to make sure your death wasn't for nothing. He set the photo down, stood up, and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. He knew there was still work to do, still changes to make, still fights to win, but for the first time in 2 years, he felt hope. So here's the truth. This story isn't just about a millionaire and a waitress. It's not just about justice or revenge or closure. It's about what happens when ordinary people do extraordinary things. Keisha Monroe didn't have money, didn't have power, didn't have a title, but she had something more important. She had the courage to speak up when everyone else stayed silent. She had the compassion to care about a stranger's pain. And she had the strength to risk everything for the truth. And because of that, a killer went to prison. A company changed, and hundreds of lives were made better. That's the lesson here. You don't need to be rich to make a difference. You don't need to be powerful to change the world. You just need to be willing to do what's right, even when it's hard. Even when it's scary. Even when no one's watching. Like, comment and subscribe for more interesting life-changing stories.